Greetings and welcome to episode 1 of And Now You Know, a series where I'm going to start going over obscure rules, unknown rules, or just weird rules, and making sure that everyone that at least watches these videos knows what is going on in Age of Sigmar. We have links in the description for Razortreeproductions.com. There you can find our Patreon page, where you can pledge to get early access to videos and music downloads. We also have a link to our ALS charities. If you just go to als.org and find a charity on there and donate, we'd appreciate that. And otherwise, enjoy the video. Did you know that there is a 3-inch threat range on enemy models in the movement phase? According to this rule, enemy units and retreats. In the core rules, on page 4, when you make a normal move for a model, no part of the move can be within 3 inches of an enemy unit. Do you need to get past these 2 units to get a better charge on that tasty hero? Well, you better get fly, because otherwise you can't legally do that. Did you know that when you charge, you always get a pile in? According to this rule, piling in the core rules on page 5, a unit can make a pile in move if it is within 3 inches of an enemy unit or has made a charge move in the same turn. Did you charge into some scrubs that died before you could attack them yourself? Fear not. You still get to pile in, even if you don't get to fight anything. Did you know you can take control of an objective on your opponent's turn? According to this rule, objectives. In the core rules on page 11, at the end of each player's turn, you must check to see if either player has gained control of any objectives. Later in the paragraph, once you gain control of an objective, it remains under your control until the enemy is able to gain control of it. Did you deploy on top of any objectives and ended up going second? Congratulations! You took control of that objective at the end of your opponent's turn, so you don't have to stand on it for your turn to control it. Abandon that thing like a Warhammer Legends War Scroll. Did you know you can deploy every unit in your battalion all at once? You may also split how many units you deploy at once, allowing you to manipulate your drop count in a tactical manner. According to this rule, battalion organization. In the core rules on page 15, last paragraph of the section. During setup, you can set up some or all of the units from a War Scroll battalion at the same time, rather than setting up each unit individually. Is it unnecessary to deploy your entire battalion to have less drops than your opponent? Stagger it and wait for your opponent to have one last drop before you finish deploying your battalion. In episode 1, I demonstrated a pile-in incorrectly. I moved the proper distance of 3 inches, but I went the wrong direction. So, Jared, that's me, did you know? When you pile in, you must move towards the closest enemy model, even if that model is nowhere near combat. According to this rule, piling in the core rules on page 5, last sentence of the section. Each model must finish its pile-in move at least as close to the nearest enemy model as it was at the start of the move. Even if an enemy model is nowhere near me, if they are the nearest enemy model, they might as well have a taunt, because you just have to get them. On that note, if you're attacking a model with a giant base, and you are already in base contact, you can spin to win until one of you gets dizzy or dies. And finally, One more clarification for another question that came up from episode 1. Did you know a charge makes you eligible to fight? According to this rule, combat phase. In the core rules on page 5, a unit is eligible to fight if it is within 3 inches of an enemy unit or if it made a charge move in the same turn. In a scenario where you charged but the enemy retreated like a filthy skink or died beforehand, like this charge with the Gorgruntas, killing them on their charge ability and then failing their 6-up death save, this is another reason you can still pile in. Did this unit think it was safe because they let their friends die a worthy meat shield death? Joke's on them. You can still pile in and get some action. Did you know a dash save characteristic is essentially a 7? According to this rule, save of dash. In the core rules on page 13, a save of dash means that you must roll a 7 or more. In most cases, this will be impossible, so no roll need be made. But sometimes modifiers will allow you to modify a save roll so that a result of 7 or higher is possible, in which case you can attempt to make the save roll. Did you move onto some fancy terrain and get a cover save? Great. You have a 6-up save now. Did a sorceress on Black Dragon successfully cast Blade Wind on your dash save unit? No! Enjoy your mortal wounds! Did you know that your territory may be different than your deployment zone? According to this rule, setup. In the core rules on page 11, each battle plan includes a map that shows where each side can set up the models in their army, called the army's territory, and will list any restrictions that apply to setting up. Your territories are color-coded on each battle plan as red or blue. Sometimes your deployment zone will be smaller than your territory. This matters for several different abilities, like Maggotkin of Nurgle's checking for contagion, or the command ability for Hammerhall of the cities of Sigmar. Righteous Purpose requires you to be wholly within enemy territory, among other restrictions, to fight an additional time at the end of the combat phase. In 3 places of power, I would be wholly within enemy territory in this position, with my Phoenix Guard. However, if this were shifting objectives, I wouldn't be in anyone's territory. Did you know you can garrison hiding in terrain? According to this rule, garrisons. In the core rules on page 10, a unit can be set up as a garrison at the start of a battle if the terrain feature is wholly within the unit's territory. Remember how territories can have an important distinction? With a battle plan like 3 places of power, your deployment zone is 12 inches, but your territory is the entire half of the board. You could deploy inside this building and become a giant wizard who has cover, is harder to hit, and has much better line of sight. The terrain piece becomes your model, and you are -1 to be hit, among other things. Did you know Bravery has a strength in numbers mechanic, sometimes? According to this rule, Battleshock phase. In the core rules, on page 5, to make a Battleshock roll, roll a dice. Add the number of models from the unit that have been slain this turn to the dice roll, and add 1 to the unit's Bravery characteristic for every 10 models that are in the unit when the test is taken. Did you just get wrecked by some Oryx? With 10 models left in this Battleshock phase, you will have your base characteristic, plus your banner bonus, +1 for your current model count. Roll the dice and add your dead models to the result. Every number over is another model slain. Did you know you don't get the unit size bonus outside of the Battleshock phase? Later, in the same rule, add 1 to the unit's Bravery characteristic for every 10 models that are in the unit when the test is taken. Is Lady Olander about to wail, quite literally, on you at the start of the shooting phase? There may be 30 of you, but it won't buffer the scream of a depressed Mortarch. There are several abilities that check against your Bravery characteristic. Just know that the model count bonus only applies when a Battleshock test is taken. Did you know? Current Bravery bonuses do apply when checking against Bravery characteristic. According to an FAQ, some abilities and spells require you to take a test against another unit's Bravery characteristic. When this is the case, do you use the Bravery characteristic after any modifiers have been applied, instead of the unmodified characteristic on the unit's war scroll? Yes. This applies to anything that has a Bravery characteristic as the requirement, like Death Shriek or Ghostly Howl. The same goes for negative modifiers to Bravery characteristic, like Prey on Fear. Bravery is not the only characteristic this idea applies to, but it is used in an example in the FAQ as well. When a characteristic is referenced, Bravery for example, does this mean the value on the war scroll or the value on the war scroll including any modifiers? The answer, the value including any modifiers. Did you know Rend reduces a dice roll, not the save characteristic? According to this rule, save roll. In the core rules on page 7, in the Making Attacks section, the opposing player rolls a dice, modifying the roll by the attacking weapon's Rend characteristic. This means that you figure out the modified value of your roll, then compare that value to the defender's save characteristic. If this Phoenix Guard wounded this Bloodsecrator, and the Bloodsecrator rolled a 3 and a 4 for saves, we would take the following steps. Take the roll of 3, modified by the attacker's Rend characteristic of -1, resulting in 2, and compare the result to the defender's save characteristic of 3. This save fails, resulting in damage. Take the roll of 4, modified by the attacker's Rend characteristic, resulting in 3, and compare the result to the defender's save characteristic of 3. This save succeeds, resulting in no damage. Did you know? Save results of 1 can succeed. Save rolls of 1 always fail. Wait, what? Later in the same rule, a save roll of 1 before modification always fails. For you old school gamers out there, that means natural 1s to save always fail. In Warhammer, unmodified rolls, or rolls before modification, just means look at what you physically rolled. If you physically roll anything higher than an unmodified 1, and Rend reduces your result to 1, a save characteristic of 1 would successfully save. This won't come into play often, but now we have the Battalion. This laser turtle starts with a save characteristic of 1. I will address bracketing in a future video. To sum up what that means, only save rolls of unmodified 1 fail for the Battalion, no matter the Rend value. That is because... Did you know? The lowest Rend can drop a dice roll is 1. According to this rule, modifiers, in the core rules on page 14. Modifiers can never reduce a dice roll to less than 1. So, you could attack with a Rend -37, 37, and it will still only reduce a save roll to 1. Still confusing? Maybe Vince from Warhammer Weekly can say it better. There are other instances this could occur, not just saves. For instance, Sorceress on Black Dragon's Fearsome Jaws initially has a wound characteristic of 1. As with saves, that means only unmodified wound rolls of 1 will fail. Did you know? Battle line behemoths ignore restrictions. Some armies have behemoths available for battle line choices, like Anvil Guard with their Hydras, and Ogor Maw tribes with their Frost Donkeys. According to this FAQ, in a pitched battle, if a unit that is a behemoth can be taken as battle line, does that unit still count towards the total number of behemoths that can be taken in the army? No. Do you want to take a black dragon with a family of Hydras, Luke, in Anvil Guard? You can. Do you want to make all the friends and have 6 models in a 2,000 point game? I hope you like fur. Did you know? Not all heroes are leaders. In pitched battle profiles, every unit has a role designated to them, such as leader. Some heroes, like Grimwrath Berserkers and Fireslayers, or Karanak in Blades of Corn, are heroes, but do not have the leader role. This means they do not count towards your leader total, but can do everything else a hero can do, like take an artifact, or use certain command abilities. This means you can make a list with Gotrek and all Grimwraths, because butts. Did you know? Allies inside battalions ignore restrictions. Some battalions let you take allies as part of it. When this is the case, they do not count towards your ally limit or cost ally points. According to this rule, War Scroll battalions, in the core rules on page 17. A War Scroll battalion can include allies. They do not count against the limit on the number of allied units you can include in the army, which, by the way, is 1 in every 4, usually. An FAQ goes into further detail and clarification. War Scroll battalions that share the same allegiance as an army can always be taken as part of the army, and if they include any allied units, these units do not count against the limits on the number of allies the army can have, or against the points limit that can be spent on allies in a pitched battle.
Did you know? Abilities can happen in subphases. Age of Sigmar occurs within phases: the hero phase, the movement phase, shooting phase, the charge phase, combat phase, and Battleshock phase. But abilities have a sort of timing within those phases that create an order of occurrence. According to this rule, abilities, in the core rules on page 13, abilities that must be used at the start of the phase are carried out before any other actions. By the same token, abilities used at the end of the phase are carried out after all normal activity for that phase has been completed. What does this mean, and how do you identify this in game? Basically, this means each phase is broken up like so. Start of phase, during or in the phase, both distinctions mean the same thing. End of phase. This can be divided even further by identifying which player's phase an ability is occurring, but this will be covered shortly. These distinctions give you a timing guideline on when you can or cannot use abilities. This means you can't use abilities that occur in a phase before you use all abilities that trigger at the start of that phase, and can't use end phase abilities until that is all you have remaining to complete. Luckily, the timing idea is reinforced in the command ability section, stating that most command abilities usually specify when it is used, clarifying even further that if it does not specify, then it occurs in your hero phase specifically. That tells you what part of what phase the ability is used. Let's look at start of phase command ability, Inspiring Presence. You can use this command ability at the start of the Battleshock phase. Well, there's your timing. If you do so, ignore Battleshock on a unit within the listed range. This timing is important because a Battleshock test occurs in the Battleshock phase, so you must use Inspiring Presence before you take any Battleshock tests. Inspiring Presence, start of the Battleshock phase. Battleshock tests, in the Battleshock phase. 2 timing keywords to look for. If an ability says in or during, they mean the same thing. Now here is an ability with 2 timing triggers in the wording. Iron Sun's command ability, Alright Get 'em. The image is taken from AOS Reminders. This is a great resource to keep track of your abilities and when to use them. Click the card to see this and other in-game resources we recommend. So Alright Get 'em is used at the end of the enemy charge phase. 2 triggers. enemy charge phase, which is not your own, at the end. So this means you have to wait until your opponent has completed all of their charges and abilities before moving to this one. So what if you both have abilities to use? When do they happen? According to this FAQ in the Core Rules Designer Commentary, the player whose turn is taking place uses their abilities first, one after the other, in any order they desire. Then the player whose turn is not taking place uses their abilities, and so on. This is an important distinction, especially if you have experience in card games like Magic the Gathering or Old Legend of the Five Rings. Abilities in Age of Sigmar do not follow an instant or reaction style timing like an I go, you go back and forth. The active player gets to do everything they want in a phase or subphase first, and then the inactive player goes. For more regarding ability timing, I strongly recommend reading the abilities section of the Core Rules Designer Commentary. They go into some of the subjects I've covered here: strike first, strike last timing, often referred to as always strike first or ASF, or ASL, always strike last. Not age, sex, location for all you old AOL messengers out there. And more. As for this video, subscribe if you liked this content and check out the playlist for more videos like this. Thank you and have a wonderful war game.